Welcome back to Burn the Haystack with Josh and Jesse.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Josh.
And this is a show where we save the best and burn the rest.
And that's take 3 of the intro, but that time was much better, so we're keeping that one, right, Jesse?
Why are you telling people that we're so terrible?
No, we're letting them know that we're giving them the best quality possible, even if it takes a couple of takes to get there. That's how much we care about you, dear
Ladies
listener.
and gentlemen, this is our confession time. We just recorded 2 full-length episodes, and we didn't think they were good enough, so we're doing this a third time. This is 3 hours in, but this is what we're doing for you.
Imagine recording. No, okay, we didn't quite do that, but we would for you if we needed to. We love you that much, because today we're talking about something pretty full on. I think a pretty serious issue that's very much all over the media right now. You're seeing it everywhere, and so we thought we probably need to talk about it, even though we kind of don't want to.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about Whittaker's new chocolate peanut butter ice cream bar. No.
Don't talk to me about that. I can't even eat it, and I want to, and it looks so good.
It's good. I'll just say it. It's good. But no, we're not talking about new ice cream. We are talking about COVID-19, otherwise known as the coronavirus, which is, everybody's talking about the coronavirus, even though they've called it COVID-19. Kind of taken the world by storm. I'm saying that like it's a new trend or like a new fashion or something like that, but literally the world has kind of gone mad around this virus.
Well, it's kind of weird because, I mean, I first heard about it through memes, not through the news, which I think is very telling of our time. You know what I mean? I saw all these memes about coronavirus and I was like, what? I didn't get it. And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, this is actually like a thing.
Yes. Yeah. I first found out about this through a video that somebody had made. I don't know if you've seen this, of this this like Geordie chick from like northern UK, like pouring Corona beers down the drain to try and protect her and her fiance from the coronavirus. It's so funny.
I swear this must be like the same kind of people who think chocolate milk comes from brown cows or something. You know what I mean?
I'm sure she does. Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, before we get into it, serious talk for a moment. I mean, yeah, we're not trying to use this for clickbait or anything. We're talking about it because we think there are some like serious Christian principles we can cover in all of this. But it's important to, like, we do want to say we are taking this seriously, and we want you to as well. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, so most of you probably have a fair understanding of what COVID-19 is at this point in time. We don't know exactly where it came from, but we do know that it came from a Chinese fish meat market in mainland China. And since it's come out, it has gone all around the world. So there's very few places in the world now that are safe, fully safe, because we live in a highly connected world. So right off the bat, obviously, there are certain things that all of us need to do in order to keep ourselves safe. You know, we need to be able to wash our hands, and, you know, if we think we've come into contact with somebody, go to see a doctor, that sort of thing. There are some very basic things that we should all do, but I think that a lot of people who are talking about COVID-19 right now are talking about it in sort of a panicky way, and I don't think that's super helpful for the conversation that we need to have as a global community about this disease and the way that we need to tackle it. Absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, make sure you're staying educated, not buying into all the fake news about it. And yeah, staying, what's the word I'm looking for? Clean. Yeah. Washing your hands, not touching your face and all that kind of stuff.
Like
when
I'm
you're in
doing
public
right now.
Yeah. Oh, that is one thing I've really learned about myself in the last 2 weeks. I love touching my face, and I don't know why. And it is so hard. As soon as somebody says don't touch your face, it is so hard to not touch your face.
Yeah.
This is probably not helping that we're still.
Well, I mean, I realized that just a few weeks ago as well when I was editing these podcast episodes, and I was like, we've been putting these podcast episodes up on YouTube now, so if you want to watch these episodes, go to youtube.com and type in Burn the Haystack. You can actually watch our episodes now, not just listen to them. But when editing, I found that, I was touching my face all the time, scratching my nose, and then when you realize it, everything becomes itchy and you want it. It's bad. So don't do that.
Yep. Do not do that. Yep. Hey, so before we get into the rest of the episode, we'll just do a very quick question of the week.
What's the question of the week, Josh?
Who is your all-time favorite cartoon character and why? Oh, just one of, you might have top three or something.
That's cool. That's cool. Does it have to be strictly, like, are we talking television shows? Are we talking comics? What are we talking?
I'm going to say, like, it's got to be like an animated cartoon character. So whether it's in a movie or a TV show, I would say those are the two options. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's pretty easy for me. Like, I think honorable mentions would be things like Garfield or Baba.
Okay.
I
wasn't expecting you to be a Garfield kind of guy, but all right.
When I was a kid, we had a family friend who used to collect Garfield comic books, and she would lend them to me, and I would just like devour them. Like, I loved Garfield, man. I loved Garfield.
Cool.
So yeah, I grew up on Garfield. I grew up watching like Baba and a lot of different cartoons, as all kids do, but I probably would have to say my favorite cartoon of all time would be Arthur from Arthur.
Really?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, I can still listen to the song in my head. I remember my favorite characters, my favorite episodes. I loved Arthur. Hey, Arthur, Aardvark, the Aardvark. I loved it. It was great.
Oh, there you go. Wow. I love learning all these things about you. It's so fun.
I feel like we're in couples therapy or something.
No. Yeah. I never really got into it.
Okay.
I don't know why. I just never. Yeah. Anyway. I don't know. I struggle with it. I asked this question. I was thinking to myself, I'm sure I'll come up with an answer by the time Jesse answers. But
should I expound more on my love for Garfield, for Arthur rather? Sorry, to give you time.
Maybe. I always really, I guess like probably the one that I watched the most as a kid and still have fond memories of would probably be like Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
Okay, I was either gonna say for you Goku or Ash from Pokemon, or maybe even Brock. Ooh.
Brock. I'll turn my trusty frying pan to a drying pan. I never really connected much with the like Pokemon characters.
Okay.
I liked Pokemon as a franchise, but just not the characters in the show. But
okay.
I guess I like Goku. But then, I don't know, I also really liked Angry Beavers, and I still have a big soft spot for both of, Norbert and Daggett.
I vaguely know of them, but I don't think I ever watched them growing up.
I watched them a lot growing up. So, yeah. Maybe, okay, I'm going to go with the two, like, as in Norbert and Daggett, because you can't really pick one or the other. They're like yin and yang, you know what I mean?
Right. No, that's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, let us know on social, or you can email us who your favorite cartoon character is.
Could I add a subcategory?
Sure.
Of adult cartoons, right? Like not like adult as in pornographic, but adult as in like grown-up cartoons, right?
Are there that many grown-up cartoons?
Bro, there's so many. There are so many.
I guess so.
There's Final Space, there's Family Guy, there's Rick and Morty. There's so many.
It's true.
So if I was to pick one grown-up cartoon, it would be Comic Book Guy from The Simpsons.
Oh, right.
I love him.
Mine would probably be Fry from Futurama then.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's great.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep.
But what about Zoidberg? Okay.
No, it's never Zoidberg. I do love the professor though. Good news, everyone. Such a good show.
Yeah.
All right. So into the content. Good
right.
news, everyone. We're heading into the content. So basically, the reason we wanted to talk about coronavirus is because basically what we've seen, the biggest thing we've seen is that it's really stirred up a lot of chaos and fear in people.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, I think like the media has been somewhat irresponsible in it at times, like just using it for headlines.
What, you mean the mainstream media irresponsible with a potentially dangerous situation for profit? Why would they do such a thing?
I've been really appalled by some of the news sources here in New Zealand and the way they're handling it. I just think it's so over the top and just scaring people, so unnecessary. And then you couple that with like the sort of dumb things you see on Facebook, which I guess some of it is legitimate. Like if you go to Woolworths or whatever and then there's no toilet paper at all.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big downer on the day, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I think I agree with you. Like, I'm not as tuned into the mainstream media as you are. I don't really watch the news. I get most of my news online. But what I've seen, I've been disappointed. Well, actually, no. I won't say that. I haven't been disappointed. I've been whelmed. Like, I you kind of expect it, right? Like I haven't been overwhelmed or underwhelmed. I have just been like, yeah, this is what the media does. And like that sounds kind of cynical, and like I'm not like, you know, one of those internet troll like, hey, mainstream media sucks, blah, 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 whatever. But it is what it is. I think the way that the world has reacted to coronavirus is definitely telling of the world that we live in. In fact, this is probably going to scare some people. It definitely made me concerned when I watched it, but YouTube, funnily enough, through their all-powerful algorithm, the other day recommended me a TED Talk by Bill Gates. And the TED Talk was from about 5 years ago.
I also got recommended this.
Okay, right. So yep. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I didn't watch it though, so...
Okay, well, I'll tell you what he said. Basically, he said that the world... specifically the West, we're prepared for terrorist attacks. We're prepared for certain natural disasters. The one thing that the West is 100% not prepared for is a pandemic. Our infrastructure, our reaction time, our research facilities, our public health programs are not prepared to handle a full-scale pandemic. He used the example of the Spanish flu, and he shared basically the Spanish flu happened in the early 1900s, and he basically projected that if a similar pandemic like the Spanish flu broke out again, this is around the SARS virus sort of era that he's talking about this, which was a big hubbub as well, but ultimately we got it under control. He said that if something like SARS or the Spanish flu broke out, the world would absolutely be devastated, because we live in a world that is highly connected, but we also live in a world, as he says, that is not prepared to deal with the highly connected way that people and goods are transmitted and transported throughout the world. So when I saw that, I was like, YouTube algorithm, that is not a good thing that I want to be watching right now.
Somewhat helpful, but maybe would have been helpful 2 years ago. Why didn't you recommend it then? Right.
Yep. And judging from the comment section, a lot of people were also watching it around the same time going, okay, this is not the right time to watch it. But I suppose what might be good is to revisit that little disclaimer that we spoke to at the very beginning of the episode. And shall we just talk some raw numbers, like what's happened in the last couple of weeks and months and where we're at right now? So we've got some data out of the World Health Organization. This is good as of the recording of this episode, but I fully expect that within a few days, this is going to be totally outdated. So as of the recording of this episode, 10th of March, 2020, this is where we sit as far as the statistics. As of right now, there are 110,071 coronavirus COVID-19 cases. There have been 3,830 deaths, 3,830 deaths. There have been 62,280 recovery cases. So, of the 110 odd thousand people that are currently or have been diagnosed with COVID-19, almost 4,000 people have died. 3,800, might be closer to 4,000 in a few days, have died, and 62,000 of those people have recovered. They have recovered without a vaccine, because there is currently no vaccine that is widely used, and we're probably not going to be getting a vaccine for some time. Those are just the raw numbers. That's what we're looking at right now. This is from the World Health Organization, so this is not, from Reddit or whatever. We also have some breakdowns of those people that have died, and it's really interesting. Of those people who have died, who amongst them rank in terms of age. So, Josh, do you want to break that down for us?
Yeah. So, from pretty much the 0 to 9 year olds, no fatalities at all. 10 to 19, 0.2%. Same with 20 to 29 years old. Same with 30 to 39 year old. So each one of those brackets individually have a 0.2% death rate. 40 to 49 is a 0.4% death rate. 50 to 59, 1.3. 60 to 69, 3.6. 70 to 79, 8.0. 80 plus years old, so that's a much bigger category, is 14.8%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So the overall, I believe, and this might have changed again, we're just dealing with current figures, but the other statistic that I've heard is that COVID-19 has about a 2 to 3% on the whole fatality rate for anybody who is infected. So that's, you basically have a 97 to 98% chance of surviving, and the numbers that we shared of the 110,000, only 3,800 have died, reflect that. So even if you do get diagnosed with the virus, you still have a very high chance of surviving it. Now, obviously, the age statistics that Josh broke down tells us, like, you don't have to be an expert to see what those numbers are telling us. They're telling us that the younger and healthier you are, the higher chance you have of actually surviving. In fact, if you are between the ages of 0 and 40 or 0 and 39, you actually have a 99.8% chance of surviving the disease, which seems pretty good to me. I don't know. It seems pretty good.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess like the fear really comes in like the fact that the disease is sort of spreading all over, and I think people are more just worried about those who are more vulnerable.
Yeah, for sure. If you have a pre-existing condition, and if you're between the ages, well, if you're basically 60 plus, there is definitely a concern there. And if you have a pre-existing condition, a lowered immune system, anything like that, that should be cause for concern. And that is definitely a cause of concern for all of us who have ailing and aging relatives. That's probably where it hits home the most for each one of us. But even amongst those cases, the people who have died from coronavirus have been people who already were, and there's no delicate way to put this, on their way down in a way. They were sick with something else. They had a compromised immune system due to something that's happened in the past, and they were susceptible not just to COVID-19 but to any disease. So it just happened that COVID-19 got to them before something else did.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I've heard like more people percentage-wise. Wait, is it percentage-wise? Oh, now I'm not sure. more people pass away from just the common flu than
Yeah.
necessarily like exactly
yeah.
coronavirus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's like, I think you kind of get, and like the coronavirus, the COVID-19 is pretty much like just a flu, from what I understand it. It's
Correct.
just a different strain.
Yeah, the symptoms are very similar to flu-like symptoms. Shortness of breath, trouble breathing, fever, congestion, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think a lot of people are definitely feeling it, whether they're far away or whether they're close. Northern Italy, for example, I wouldn't probably want to be in Northern Italy right now. Interestingly enough, Karina and I went away 2 weekends ago to Australia, and the amount of people that we saw on the plane with face masks was quite frightening. Even when it came to the airport staff coming in to clean the plane after we left, I was watching them as I was leaving my plane, and they were in full-on like rubber suits with gas masks and goggles and everything like that.
Wow. That's, yeah. Yeah, I mean, even I think we flew over just before you, and I was shocked just seeing all the airport staff in Australia all wearing the masks and gloves, and I'm like, I've never seen like an Australian airport like this before.
Yeah.
It was really jarring to see. And I think seeing stuff like that does like kind of freak you out. You might blow it out of proportion in your head when you see that. I mean, they're just taking precautions because they're obviously living in a place where like working in a place where there are people from all around the world, like, so obviously they need to take the most care being in airports. But when you see that at your own like home country airport, it's pretty, I think it sparks a lot of like concern, I think.
No, definitely. Even when we were coming back from Australia, the final flight that we had, we got news that somebody that had been diagnosed with coronavirus was on the flight before us to Palmerston North on the same plane, but not the same plane, not the same flight that we were on. She had just returned with her family from Northern Italy to Palmerston North. So we have 1 to 3 confirmed cases even here right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's, What, in Palmerston North or just in...
They've been quarantined.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Whoa. I haven't heard about that guy in Auckland who his wife got it and then he got it, but he was at a Tool concert on...
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, that's a very specific demographic of New Zealand that's just about to take a hit from... Anyway. Oh, that's crazy though, that he was at a concert. I mean, if you were at that concert, you'd be...
Yeah, you could be moshing up against him. You just don't know.
Yeah, and a mosh pit is definitely a way to transfer all sorts of germs.
Oh boy.
Can confirm.
Oh boy. Yeah, okay. So I think we've gone far enough into like we're kind of on the edge of like, this is crazy and you're panicking about it, but that's not the point of this whole discussion, right? Like that's what we're actually here to address.
Yeah, I think when you're a Christian, like when you're following Jesus, you are called to sort of see the world differently and the things that happen in the world differently. And it's not always easy. It's easy for us to get caught up in the hype. And I have seen a number of people hype this up in the name of Christianity too. And I think some of that has been a bit, well, I don't know. Like I don't want to rag on someone else's beliefs. But I've seen people overhyping this as like, one of the plagues of Revelation kind of thing.
Right.
Like this is a sign of the end. And I'm like, okay, it's like, it's definitely like, becoming a global issue, but like, come on, it's not at that sort of level. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of making it something it's not. We don't know. Okay. We don't know the full effects of COVID-19. Like we don't know how far it'll go and what it'll do, but from where I'm sitting right now, just from my armchair medical degree. No. No. Well, I don't know. Just from what I'm seeing and conversations I've had with medical professionals in my church and stuff about it, they're all like, I mean, yeah, it's big, but it's not like going to be It doesn't seem to be a kind of disease that's going to end the world or something.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that there is a pattern that I've seen emerge, and it's always there, and it's really, really horrible. Of something tragic or horrible happens in the world, and then the same Christian leaders jump on it like it's a live hand grenade, and they make all these really blatant and outlandish claims about how this is impacting the world and how this impacts the future and the lens through which we understand biblical prophecy. And I think as Seventh-day Adventists, at least in our faith tradition, we're kind of the worst at this in a way. Like we're definitely not the worst, but we definitely rank up there amongst the most sort of panicky, just jump on this thing as it comes up sort of people. Because I was just going to explain why, but in some ways I don't know why. Maybe it's our heritage of the Millerite movement or whatever, but we just seem to do this every time.
Yeah, and obviously I resonate with the words of Jesus when he talks about like having an eye, like keeping an eye out on the signs of the times and all that kind of thing, which is totally fair. I think you need to be aware of what's going on and like having an eye for what's going on in this time of the world. And hey, what did Jesus teach us about this, and what are we supposed to do in response to this? But I think just we have people in our like church globally who just take that way too far, and they try and I don't know. It's almost like they're like just trying to make things become like, oh, it's a thing. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
if you just cast your mind back to like 2 months ago, what was everybody saying about the bushfires in Australia? Like, it's God's judgment on Australia for passing, gay marriage or whatever it might be, like people aren't pious enough. We talked about this, I think with Ty Gibson all the way back in January, like that's the mentality that some people have. And now coronavirus is around, and again, I don't want to give any traction to anybody, but there are certain people that when you're listening to us talking about these people, you know exactly who we're talking about. I just saw one recently, not an Adventist, but a Baptist preacher, and his whole thing is coronavirus God's judgment against the world, or
my goodness,
like that's a few months ago, just when coronavirus was just starting out. There was a YouTuber that I saw that said, is coronavirus God's judgment against China specifically because it has such strict anti-religious laws? And it's like, well, China is cracking down on Christians. They're burning Bibles. They're shutting down churches. They're putting Christian leaders in jail. This must be God's judgment against them. And it's like, well, yeah, China has done some pretty shady things, and they're not, the most generous and peaceful and lovely government in the world. But they're doing way worse things to Muslims right now than they are to Christians. And are we just going to stay silent about that? Or are we going to get up in arms because they're doing something to Christians, and we're going to blame coronavirus like this is God raining down, like he rained down the plagues on Pharaoh? I just think it's such a stretch. It is such a stretch.
Yeah.
And every time something new comes out, we just jump on it, and it just, it's crazy to me, man. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I will say, like, I am grateful as an Adventist, we don't seem to have that narrative coming out of our church as much, that, this horrible event happens, that's his judgment on this specific people for their sins. Like,
yeah,
I'm grateful. Like, I hear that coming from other denominations. I don't hear it very much from ours. But I think the one that we do hear from ours is like, oh, this is a sign of the end, that Jesus is coming soon. And I mean, okay, I want Jesus to come soon just as much as anybody, right? But and so I'm not like saying that this isn't possibly a sign of that, but I guess like it just seems like they'll overhype anything to like put it at that level of like, this is definitely like what this specific verse is talking about in Revelation or whatever, like definitely this, look, and they tie all these things together. And I don't know, sometimes it just seems like, I feel like because we've read the Bible, we've seen it, I feel like we'll know like when it's actually the thing, you know what I mean? we'll just know. It's kind of like when you meet the one who you're going to marry, you just know.
So you're saying the end of the world is like meeting the person that you're destined to spend the rest of your life with. That's the analogy that you're going with.
Well, I guess I am, but that doesn't seem wise now that I look at it in retrospect. But
No,
you know what I mean? I just feel like if you're wise and discerning, we'll be able to figure it out. I don't know. But
I think human beings, ever since the earliest formations of spiritual sects and cults and religions, human beings have been obsessed with acquiring and guarding secret knowledge. I think we've just been obsessed with it. You know, like that's what the early Christians had to deal with the Gnostic cults and many of the other cults surrounding. Like, you know, Paul talks to the Colossians about an angel worshipping cult, and all of these religions and all of these sects and all these cults revolve around, I have secret knowledge that has been imparted to me either by God or by some other wise oracle, and it's my duty to either guard it or it's my duty to give it out to the world. And if that's totally crazy, well, it doesn't matter because it's secret knowledge. I think we're just obsessed with that. I think we're obsessed with feeling like we've been given something special and unique, and we have to justify our thought patterns, our religious formulations by proving how right we are and how much better we are for having this information.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you see that a lot. That kind of like, oh, I have this information and you don't. I have this power, like I can lord it over you, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's a very true observation. I hadn't thought about this in that context. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about maybe what we think a better response to all this would be. So we'll be right back. Okay, so what would maybe a better response to this situation look like? That's the question we want to tackle and unpack in the second half of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think that you touched on it earlier, and I think really a mature Christian response, I'm not going to say like a better or a more whatever, but I think a mature Christian response would be to acknowledge that maybe things are bad, but be realistic about where things are, and also be realistic about where our priorities lie. We're all human beings. We're all flawed. We all have our faults and our weaknesses. And it, as you said at the beginning, Josh, it's easy to get caught up with panic and hysteria because we're all susceptible to that to a lesser or greater degree. But when I look at the history of the church and I look at what the church has endured, whether it's the rise and fall of empires, conquest, torture, persecution, disease, genocide, the whole spectrum of what the church has endured ever since the days of Jesus all the way to the modern era, and I look at COVID-19, when you take all of history into account, this is nothing more than a tiny blip in the story that is God's people in the world on the way to the kingdom. And that might sound very grandiose, and that might sound, you know, like a little bit condescending on like the realities of life. But in all seriousness, the church and people have endured far worse than this, and they've gotten through it, and it's been okay.
Yeah, totally. Like God has this way of carrying his people through, like crazy, really crazy things in history. Like like when you look at look at things like the Dark Ages and like like the Spanish flu and all that kind of stuff, and
the plague, the Black Plague.
Yeah, what was that? 1/3 of Europe passed away from that. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
But But that's the thing, like the church is still here. God's still doing his thing. He's still moving in people's lives,
Yeah.
even amongst all that chaos and through the other side of that.
Yeah. I think that there's a hope that a follower of Jesus has that nobody else has. It's unique to us, and it's what the early Christians had to deal with on a day-by-day basis, because life and death were often not very far apart from each other. You know,
True.
You might wake up one day and you might be dead the next, and you just never knew in the ancient world where death was so common. You could be pulled out of your home and your family could be killed, and you could be nailed to a cross or worse. That was a reality that first, second, and third century Christians, and certainly until Christianity was legalized in the empire, that's what they had to deal with. And so the early Christians, they had this incredible faith. And even today, there are Christians in the Middle East and in China and in other countries where the faith of Jesus is not legal. They have this faith that man can do whatever they want to the body, but reality is that God holds everyone together, and that there's a part of you that cannot be killed. There's a part of you that cannot be taken away from you. It's the part of you that has faith and that knows that Jesus can resurrect your body, even if men kill it. And that is, as I say that, like I feel like a hypocrite, because like I've never had to be in that situation, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what it would be like if I ever was in that situation. Would I?
Fully, yeah.
You know? But that's what early Christians had.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. In the Western world, we live in this super safe bubble where nothing can touch me almost. Like you just feel so safe and secure. And then something like what we see with coronavirus, and it starts coming into our territory, and we're like, whoa, why? I have to change my life for this. I'm being affected by this. This is a pandemic. You know what I mean? Like I can't believe this. And I think, but that's the thing. Like we have to have that hope that, like that sort of grit that got the early church through those insanely difficult circumstances. And I think we've grown soft. As soon as something gets a bit too hard, we're like, nah, I got other options, you know?
Yeah. No, it's true. I think that's possibly what really has devastated the church in the West, especially in the West, is that as Christianity has become ingrained with the culture, and we don't live in that Christian culture anymore. We live in a post-Christian or even a post-Christian culture, certainly a post-modern culture. That's not the reality that we live in. And, you know, part of the critique of Christianity, certainly in the 20th century, was that people didn't really live their faith, you know. The late, great comedian George Carlin once said that Christianity is a great idea. It's just a shame that nobody's ever tried it, you know. And that's been the critique, that, you know, Christianity in theory is a nice idea, but who actually can live it and who actually has lived it? Certainly in the 20th century, it seemed that Christianity was a faith all about verbal assent, about intellectual ideas, not about that real grit that Josh was talking about, not that sort of movement that actually transforms the way that you live every moment and the way that you conduct every thought and action. But when I think about, you know, what those early Christians did, it makes me feel like, man, we wouldn't be here without the bravery and the courage of those first century men and women. We wouldn't be here being able to talk about Jesus and have faith in Jesus if they didn't stand up to the empire, if they didn't stand up to tyranny, if they didn't actually choose to give their lives, if that was what was required of them, for what they believed in. And so I think that should cause us to take pause, and it should cause us to re-examine, what does my faith consist of? Is my faith built on the solid rock of Christ and the courage and the love that is built into that foundation, or are we, like in the parable, building our house on the sand?
Wow. I know we don't do a whole lot of Bible study sort of thing on this podcast, but I just wanted to share. Like, I preached on this passage this last Saturday at church, and John 14:27. This is the words of Jesus. He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." I love that passage. It's so, I mean, it can be really used as like a cliche a lot, but I think in these times of trouble and chaos, Christians are kind of meant to be the ones with their foundations in the rock, like what you're talking about, and sort of stable amidst all this chaos, and you know, like we're the ones who are meant to be level and be okay. Even though, yeah, obviously, like your lifestyle might change. You might have to take precautions, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, you might be concerned, but ultimately you're grounded. The reason I preached on that passage was because I've been looking back into the word shalom and its meaning, like the Hebrew word for peace, which is when Jesus is speaking to a Jewish audience, even though he's using the word, he's like, you know, obviously using it in a New Testament language, and it gets translated to irene in the Greek. But when he's talking to a Jewish audience, obviously the kind of peace they're thinking of is shalom. And I love like the way like the word shalom works is kind of like it gets used for a whole lot of things in the Old Testament. It's when relationships are made right. It's when like, you know, if your like neighbor, I don't know, if your ox goes and destroys your neighbor's farm, and then you go and give them compensation, you're actually you're bringing shalom to the relationship again. You're bringing that wholeness and completeness back. And sort of shalom is when you've got this big complicated thing, but it's all working together as it should be. Or it's like if you've got like a brick wall and every brick is in its right place. And that's the thing, like we're supposed to have this peace in our hearts, and it's like, you know, that every brick is in its place. Everything is as it should be. God is working all of this together, and yeah, there might be problems, but you're trusting that God is going to work through it.
Yeah, I think that's the tension that we live in as followers of Jesus, because we live in a world that is so obviously messed up. There's obviously everything is not okay. Yeah. And yet we are called to live as if everything is okay, as if the shalom that was promised is here, that the kingdom of God is reigning, even though in many places it feels like it's not. And so I think that we often conflate this message with, if you just believe hard enough, everything's going to be fine. You know, if you just have faith, God will magically fix all your problems. And I believe that God is interested in the small things, in the little things. But I think what Jesus is asking us to do is to live and behave as though everything is okay, even when it's not. And that's not like a blind faith. Let's just pretend like everything's okay and let's just walk around like everything's fine when things are falling apart. No, it's like we are saying that we believe that the kingdom that is here is not the true kingdom, that there is a greater kingdom, a greater government, a greater law, a greater ruling body that actually supersedes our current situation, and that one day its inauguration and its establishment is going to be fully set up. And that's the kingdom that we live in.
Woo! Can't wait. Love it. Yeah. And it's like and that's the thing, Jesus also, he talks about blessed are the peacemakers, you know? Yeah. So we're also kind of called in a way to go out and bring that, like, it's like that picture of ultimate peace that we have. We're supposed to bring a slice of that to everywhere that we can in our lives, all around us. We're the ones who are called to be bringing peace where there's disruption, chaos, fear, and all that jazz. You know, it's
Jesus doesn't say, blessed are the peace wishers or the peace hopers. He says, blessed are the people who make peace.
Yeah, which is, it's hard. You know, making peace can be hard. And bringing peace in, especially chaotic seasons like what we're seeing at the moment, it can be really difficult. Yeah. It can be hard to calm people down. And like, let's be honest, some people like the chaos. I think that's why the memes took off so quickly with with coronavirus. It's just like people are like, oh, I can meme this and make lots of internet points and get lots of attention for it. And you know, like memes are great. I love memes. I'm not having to go at them, but like some people just sort of revel in chaos and revel in fear and profit off it in a way. But I don't think we're called to that. We're actually called to bring peace.
Yeah.
And that stillness in the storm that Jesus has for us all.
Yeah. Yeah. There was an early Christian leader, Saint Augustine of Hippo, which apparently Hippo was a place. He wasn't Saint Augustine of the Hippo.
Saint Augustine the Hippo.
Anyway,
he rode a hippo to work every day. That would be incredible. I would have way more respect for anybody.
His cousin was Jeremiah, who was a bullfrog. Anyway, so dumb. So Augustine lived during a really tumultuous time in Western history. He lived through basically the final fall of the Roman Empire, and he was a Christian leader in his time, and he ended up writing a classic to this day, a classic, The City of God. And if you want to go and read it, it's a very short read, great read, but he reflects on what's going on around him at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, and he reflects on sort of his place in it and the church's place in it. And I just love to share this little bit from his book. He says, God does not raise up citadels of stone and marble for us. Outside of this world, he raises up citadels of the Holy Spirit for us, citadels of love which could never collapse, which will forever stand in glory when this world has been reduced to ashes. Rome has collapsed, and your hearts are outraged by this. Rome was built by men like yourself. Since when did you believe that men had the power to build things that are eternal? But your souls, filled with the light of the Holy Spirit, will not perish.
Dang. Saint Augustine of Hippo.
The man.
That is good.
So
he's really good.
He sees everything. That's because the fall of the Roman Empire wasn't just an economic fall. It wasn't just slow. It was a slow, gradual fall. But the final years and decades of the empire, they were violent. They were filled with horror. They were filled with horrible things to innocents. Barbarian tribes completely reducing cities to ash, raping and pillaging, murder, mayhem, theft and thievery. It was a lawless, tumultuous, chaotic time. And yet, in the midst of all of this, he has the wherewithal and the foresight to be able to pen these words, which is insane, you know? And his contemporaries may have thought him insane to have peace and to have shalom throughout this time, but he's saying, no, even though we live in a tumultuous time, in a chaotic time, God is saying there are certain things that are never going to pass away. Your faith is never going to pass away. If you choose, your peace can never pass away, because God is in control ultimately. Though it might not seem like it right now, God is in control, and he is calling you to live and act like he is in control.
Yeah, and I don't think it's not easy. Like, it's kind of easy for us to talk about, but yeah, it's hard to put into practice when you're in the midst of it, you know?
Yeah.
But I guess this is something we have to ground ourselves in again. We have to burn away, you know, all that complication and just be regrounded again. And asking for that peace when you need it. Like, just as a practical, like, just praying for peace in your heart is such an incredible prayer to pray.
Yeah.
And a peace, like, in the midst of it all. Yeah. I don't know. It's... Yeah, I don't know. I feel convicted by this, you know, by the end of the episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else we should touch on? Are you happy with that?
I think that's it. Wash your hands, guys. Stay safe. Be wise. And live as though we're in a peaceful place, in a peaceful time, because ultimately we are citizens not of the kingdoms of this world, but of the kingdom of heaven. And The kingdom is coming because the king is on the throne.
Yeah. Don't panic in a pandemic. Have
Keep
peace.
calm and
He has
carry on.
overcome.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good. All right. Well, anyway, hey, but we'd love to know your thoughts. Get in contact with us, on social but the best way to find everything Burn the Haystack is, of course, at burnthehaystack.org.
Awesome. And if you haven't already, please, I would love it if you would subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on any podcatching app of choice. You can also find us on YouTube now, so just go to youtube.com and search Burn the Haystack. You can watch our ugly mugs instead of just listening to our ugly voices. No, I think we got some pretty good voices.
Thanks,
I don't know.
man.
Our voices are okay. Yeah.
I feel like you have a real radio voice.
Sometimes I do. Depends on the day.
Okay.
Anyway, and if you haven't already, please leave us a review on whatever podcatching app you have available to you. Really helps us get out there. Helps us to spread, much like COVID-19. Anyway, all right. I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. You knew that it was coming. Save me. All right, finish this up, Josh.
Did. Yeah, let's get out of here. That is Josh and Jesse out.